I'll never forget that day, for as long as I live. It's the day Jesus died. Just a week before, he'd come into town and everyone got out of all their houses, out of the shops, out of the schools. Everyone wanted to see him because the famous Jesus had come to our town. And we'd heard all of these stories about all the amazing things that he was doing. Like, there was this one man who was born blind, and he went to Jesus, and Jesus healed him. He could see. I mean, that's amazing. And there was this other girl, and she had been dead for 2 days. And Jesus just went to her and said, "Get up," and she did. And when he came into town, he was just, he came up riding on a donkey, but there were so many people from other towns, like hundreds of people following him. And everyone came out and they started putting their coats on the floor so that the donkey could walk over them. And they had these huge palm leaves and they were waving them and waving them, singing and dancing, saying, "Hosanna, Hosanna, Jesus is the King of the Jews." And I will never forget how, as he was going past, he just looked right into my eyes and he smiled. Next week I was at home and I was just cooking in the kitchen and I could hear screaming outside, and it was Mary, so I ran out and I said, "What's wrong?" She said, "They've arrested Jesus, they've arrested him, they've taken him away and he's not done anything wrong." We didn't know what to do, so we ran to the courts. And at the time, it was the Passover festival. And every year, the Romans would let one prisoner go. And so we were there and we were sure that they would let Jesus go because, well, he was innocent. And they gave us the choice. We could free Jesus or Barabbas. Now, we were sure they would choose Jesus because he'd not done anything wrong. And this Barabbas guy, he was mean, he was nasty, he was a murderer. But when the governor asked, "Who shall I set free?" everyone just started singing, "Free Barabbas! Free Barabbas!" And then he asked, "What shall I do with Jesus?" And everybody just started screaming, "Crucify him! Crucify him!" I couldn't take it anymore. I just ran away. But the next time I saw Jesus, I barely recognized him. They had just beaten him so much, his face was all swollen and he was covered in blood. They got this crown of thorns, these huge thorns, and they'd stuck it on his head so the blood was just pouring down him. And they'd whipped him and they'd whipped him until he had huge gashes all over his back. And to make it worse, they put this huge cross on his back and they made him carry it up the street, all through the city. And as he went, everyone was just screaming at him and spitting at him. How dare they? These people were just praising him a week before. When we got to the top of the hill, I could just see it all. They got these huge nails and they were nailing him to the cross. I've been to other crucifixions before, and they just tie the person up. But with Jesus, they nailed him there. And his mum was just there and she was just crying and she was crying and she was crying. And I looked at Jesus, I looked at this face which had smiled at me, and he was just so sad. And I just got a little bit closer and I heard him speaking. He said, "Father, forgive them." He wanted God to forgive the people that were killing him. At this point it was just too much, and I ran home and I was crying, but in the middle of the day it went pitch black, and it was so scary because the ground was shaking and there was a huge earthquake. And I found my house and I just sat on the floor and I just cried and I cried and I cried. Jesus was dead. I'll never forget that day.